So nice to be here. Thank you for coming out this afternoon. And a correction, I always say it's Quinton, previously known as Pretorious, in keeping with the new South Africa. And now that we have a new mayor and a new political party in place, who knows what my surname might be. It might go back to Pretorious after all. This man is taking his son on an aeroplane for the very first time. Son's very excited, a little bit nervous. Not long after the flight is up, get a little bit of turbulence. The son gets a bit scared, and the air hostess comes on, and it seems like a theme about planes in our talks today. And the plane gets a bit shaky, and the air hostess comes on and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we need to get rid of our passengers. There's something wrong with the plane, but don't worry, we have an unfair way of getting rid of our passengers." And everyone's like, "Oh, okay, great. We use the alphabet." I'm like, "Okay, fair enough. So we're going to start with A. Will all the Africans please get up and get off the aeroplane?" The little boy's about to move. The father hits him and says, "Sit still." The little boy's sitting there, his eyes a little bit big, and like a minute or two later, they say, "Right, we're done with A, we're moving on to B. Will all the blacks please get up and get off the aeroplane?" The little boy's about to move. The father hits him and says, "Sit still." The boy's eyes even a little bit bigger now, even a little bit more confused. A couple of minutes go by, they say, "Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready for C. Will all the people of color please get up?" The little boy's about to move. The father hits him, says, "Sit still." Now the little boy's confused. He says, "Dad, who are we or what are we today?" The father says, "Son, today we're Zulus." Now I looked around the room. The first time I went, it was funny. The second time, people were like, "Hi." The third time, people said, "Who the heck is this person talking about diversity up here?" But I like to start with that because I think it's a question we ask ourselves every day in South Africa. Who am I and what am I doing here? And I think if we talk about diversity, this country doesn't seem to disappoint in terms of the wonderful opportunities to talk about the subject. Every week, there's something new, right? And this week has been like any other week. It has provided us an opportunity to talk about diversity and what's happening in Pretoria Girls High. And it's not just South Africa. It's overseas with the burqa or the bikini. It's in the US with Black Lives Matter. And it's everywhere we find ourselves. And so it's a topic that I think we need to engage with. So very quickly, with the person next to you, think about quickly what comes to mind when you say diversity, and what is your biggest diversity challenge that you find in your life at this moment in time? All right. I'm so sorry to bring your conversations. It looks like some of you could write a thesis on this. Could one or two people share about what they heard their partner say? Very quickly, just shout out at me just to see what people are saying. Some people are nudging that person. I'm not sure if what that means, but Jackie, somebody nudged you. So.
Okay, so when we think about diversity, what comes to mind is diversity around racial, cultural, and religious lines. And I think the one challenge around diversity is how we constantly putting people into boxes and molds based on the stereotypes we have about, what group they sort of fall in.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Just because of time, I only want one more person. Kosiami, did you put your hand up or your head's itchy? Sorry. Anybody else going once?
Wealth, just the heads and have-nots.
Okay.
Irrespective of culture and color scheme.
Cool. So the class differentiation that we have. So when I talk about diversity, it's one of my favorite stories of all time. It's a particular time in history when the Pope decided that all the Jewish people should leave Rome. So the Jewish leadership went to the Pope and said, "This cannot happen." He said, "I'm the Pope, I've made the decision." After a little bit of conversation, the Pope agreed that there would be a debate. And whoever won the debate would determine whether the Jewish people could stay or leave. And the Jewish people need to go find their champion. So they went to business. Nobody from business wanted to debate the Pope. So they went to the educational institutions, civil society, education institutions. Nobody was willing to debate the Pope. Eventually they found Joshua, a cleaner in the synagogue, and said, "Joshua, you are last hope. Please, will you debate the Pope?" At first he said no. But after a little bit of conversation, he said, "Okay, I'll debate the Pope on one condition." "Oh, Joshua, what is that condition?" "That it's a silent debate." "A silent debate?" He says, "Yeah, that's the only way I'm going to debate the Pope." So he said, "Sure, bring it on." So on a particular day, the whole of Rome came to watch the debate between the Pope and Joshua. And so the Pope started like this. Immediately, without batting an eyelid, Joshua did this. The Pope was shocked that Joshua could reply so quickly. And so then the Pope did this. Without batting an eyelid, Joshua did this. Now, the Pope was very nervous, and he clicked his fingers very nervously, and some priests and cardinals ran on, and the Pope pointed to this, and they opened it up, and it was Holy Communion. And then, without even thinking, Joshua pulled out an apple. The Pope threw his hands up and said, the Jewish people have won the debate, and storms off the stage. The Jewish people pick Joshua up and sing and celebrate as they go back to the synagogue. And so they said to the Pope behind closed doors, Your Holiness, what happened? He said, I started with the big guns, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. What was Joshua's reply? That there is one God. How could I argue that? Fair enough. So what did you do then, Your Holiness? Well, I said that that God is all around us. And what was Joshua's reply? That God is right here in our midst. I could feel him. How could I argue that? Fair enough. So what did you do then, Your Holiness? Well, I brought out something that there's no argument against. Holy Communion, there's no argument against it. Fair enough. What was Joshua's reply? He pulled out an apple to remind me of the fall of man and the need for grace. Thus the Jewish people won the debate. Fair enough. Back at the synagogue, singing and celebrating just as Jewish people can do. They said, Joshua, tell us what happened. He said, the Pope's giving us 3 days before we need to leave. And what was your reply? Not 1 day are we moving. That's right. Then what did he do? He said, he's going to gather us all up and we'll have to leave. And what did he say? Well, I said, we're staying right here. That's right. Then what did the Pope do? Oh, well, he did something really strange. What is that? He brought his lunch. And what did you do? I took my lunch out. Now, I like that story on many, many, many different levels. One, it explains my relationship between my mother-in-law and myself, right? Because there's been lots of silent debates in our families as we do things slightly differently in our house. I think it also reminds me of the silent debates that happen in our country. You have Julius Malema losing his mind. And instead of approaching people that are like Julius Malema, we go to our brides, we go to our dinner tables, and we make up a whole bunch of assumptions about what that guy is doing when he's losing his mind. And maybe, and only maybe, in your own organization, there might be these silent debates that happen at the water cooler. Did you see the way she looked at me when I walked into work today? And we create all these kind of things. And that's how we don't leverage our diversity in organizations. And if we're going to really leverage the community, the diversity in our organizations, we really need to start speaking about what our assumptions are that are around in our workplaces. So 50 years ago, workplaces were very different. In fact, in South Africa, we can even say 25 years ago, the workplace was very, very different. Everybody looked like you, believed like you, spoke like you. And in fact, 25 years ago, this would be an illegal gathering. Just think about that. Speaking about diversity, with a diverse group of people in the room, the police would be very suspicious of us. And it would be an illegal gathering. And so in some ways, things have changed in the workplace. And for some places, if we start looking senior levels in the organization, and I've been doing this over the last couple of years, very little has changed. If we start looking at C-suites within organizations, they still look and sound and believe very similar to each other. But we're entered into a whole new world of diversity, a whole new era of diversity. For the first time, you have 4 generations working in the workplace at the same time, and we now have the strange new Z generation starting to creep in, who think completely different to the way we do, and the rules really do not apply to them. We have Y generation starting to become leaders in organizations. And I've now spoken to a multinational. They said, our senior leader is a Y generation. We have no idea what this woman's going to do. They're actually petrified. The boomers are really petrified of this Y generation young woman that is leading a group of them. And so it's a really interesting dynamic. The interesting thing, if we think about how gender is being started to talk about. People are even afraid to say the word gay in meetings. And the other day I said, I used the word queer. I got such a big backlash from using that word in a meeting. But things are really dynamic. Things are changing really, really quickly when we think about inclusivity or around diversity. We live in a globalized world where people are setting up meetings needing to take in consideration that they're meeting with somebody in Brazil and somebody in India. And how do you have a meeting with those 3 people on a telecom? And how do you sell your ideas to somebody that's living in Turkey? And do you know what you need to do when you're busy engaging with that? And we need to think about when we're having meetings and there's food in the meeting. Are you doing that during Ramadan? And so there's a complexity that comes with the diversity that we're beginning to talk about. So let's think about diversity globally. So on a scale, least, most diverse country in the world. Shout out. What do you think?
South Africa.
South Africa? USA? England? Canada? Since the Glaminis arrived, they've become diverse. Right, so here we go. In the middle, you've got Turkey, USA, Singapore, France, so the countries in the middle. Least diverse countries, you have Japan, Argentina, Norway, and Haiti. I was surprised by Haiti being at the bottom of the list. Top of the list, you have Nigeria, South Africa, India, and Canada, which I was surprised by, right? But it's not, what is the most diverse country in the world? And I put the flag up so to see if anybody knows the African countries. Chad. Chad is the most diverse country in the planet. Hundreds of different languages, different religions, and it's really interesting to think about that. That Chad is the most diverse country in the world. And so what diversity matters? Because if we think about diversity in its fullness, then it becomes nothing. And you think about every single thing that we could possibly think about. And diversity is more about being black and white. It's more about German versus Indian. It's more than our race or our religion. We're far more and more complex than that. So I want to talk about two diversities that matter most in the workplace. The first one is this, visual diversity. We make our minds up about people within the first 10 seconds that we meet them. And we put them either in an inbox or an outbox. Whether we like it or not. We all did it this morning when we walked into the room. Well, if you're the first person in the room, you have your choice of where to sit. They say if you want to sit at the back at church, you need to come last, right? First, then you can sit at the back. And the front is the latecomers normally. But when you started walking in and there was a couple of people in the room, you looked around the room and you did this within the first 10 seconds to say, where am I going to sit? Malcolm Gladwell speaks about it in his book, Blink, where in Germany they were looking for trombone players. And the leader, the conductor of the orchestra, his son was a trombone player. So they needed to do a blind audition. So they put a screen up and they played the trombone. And then they all chose number 4. When they lifted the curtain, to their amazement, it was a woman. A trombone isn't a woman's instrument. And there'd never been a woman playing that instrument in that orchestra before. And what they started to find, that when they started doing blind auditions, more black folks started getting onto orchestras, more females started playing male instruments, more males started playing female instruments, and it all had to do within the first 10 seconds that when that person walked onto the stage, she can never play the trombone. Or this person can never do that. And it's all subliminal in the back of their minds. And so visual diversity is vitally important when we think about leveraging diversity in organizations. The next one is this, underrepresented groups. So anybody that's less than 15% made up on your team, you need to pay attention to. The research shows that if somebody's underrepresented on any particular group, 2 things happen. 1, they feel fearful to voice their opinion or concerns about things. Or secondly, they'll say, I'm not going to voice because it's futile to engage in this conversation. And so as a leader, you need to be aware of who are the underrepresented people on my team and how do I create the space for those underrepresented groups, 1, to feel safe, and secondly, that if they're going to voice, that their voice is legitimate and their voice has credence in terms of when they're speaking about. And this underrepresented group is also visible, but also invisible things that you can think about. So somebody's ideology, somebody's sexual orientation, whether they're an introvert versus an extrovert. And this is also contextualized. So in corporate South Africa, generally black females would be the underrepresented group in that kind of setting. But go to the township on a weekend to a wedding and a white guy walks in, he might be the underrepresented person in that. I'm just saying might be, but us white oaks got a way of our privilege walking in with us before we get there, and that's a whole nother conversation. So those are the 2 things that we need to think about. Visual representation and underrepresented groups, or tokenism, and how are they represented in our groups. So what are some of the barriers to doing diversity work? So when I go around to companies talking about diversity, this is what they say. This is very important for us, but it's not quite urgent at the moment. You'll hear people saying, I got diversity training tomorrow. I need another hole in my head. It's like going to visit the dentist. We have to do it, but we don't really want to do it, right? Diversity training isn't top of mind of somebody. Once somebody said, I can go to diversity training as long as everybody's like me. Then I'm happy to go on this diversity training, right? And so those are some of the barriers that we have. It's important, but not maybe urgent for some people, and as we begin to talk about it. So the first one, diversity fatigue. We're done. We've been doing it since 1982. And so this is the story. 1982, I went on a cultural awareness course, and I know how to act around time and leadership. I've done those things. And then we had the 1990s, where we went on the TRC, sort of sit in a circle. I share my pain. I'm sorry for all the things I did. We tick that box. Can we move on? Let's make things happen. And then you had the 2000s, where you used to have what we call these expos, like where executives would go into the township and sit and meet with somebody that's not like them, or have a prisoner come to the boardroom and share how hard it was being like this. And you had all those incredible experiences where we reached out to people that we wouldn't normally speak with. And that's happened to the 2000s. And now in the 2015, 2020, it's embarrassing if you haven't done any of those things. And we're finding people starting to retreat and not knowing how to even start the conversation. Because I remember we often say that if you're going to be inclusive in your leadership, it starts with you in your own personal life. And I remember hearing an executive at a multinational we've been engaging with saying, I don't have any black friends my own age, and I don't know how to make black friends. And how is that person supposed to lead with inclusivity in his organization if he can't do it in his own personal capacity? And this guy finds a real struggle. But for most of us, we're tired of it. In fact, Susanna, this week, she said, oh no, another diversity challenge we have this week. It's getting too much. And so we're becoming tired with it. Shame on you is another topic that comes up with diversity, right? You can't use master bedroom. Oh, Ed, you ever had your turn to speak, eh? It's a shame on you topic. We need to be careful what words we use. You can no longer use master bedroom because this person was attached to slavery somehow in their lives. You can't talk about a walk-in closet just in case the person buying your house is disabled, right? And so we wonder what words can we use, when can we use them, and we become paralyzed by being politically correct. We don't know how to begin to engage with it. And so we say that guy, you know that guy that walked in? Which guy? And now we don't know, can we say the word black, colored anymore? There are some organizations that cannot do that. And why? Because I think they haven't begun to deal with it in their own personal lives. The other barrier is representation and compliance. And we're obsessed with it in South Africa. Every single meeting, we're ticking boxes. We're saying male, female, they've got all those things. We're getting people that are not doing that. There's a danger when we become obsessed with this only. The research shows that homogeneous teams outperform diverse teams when the culture of that organization is not right. That homogeneous teams outperform diverse teams. And what we're seeing in South Africa is corporate South Africa takes a whole group of people, diverse people, put them in the room and expect them to work. And they are not working really well. And they're saying diversity doesn't work. The other problem that happens when we start doing this, there was a pen company that said, oh my gosh, we haven't created pens for women. So let's do this. And this pen company put this advert together, thinking that, and think about the board of this company. They are all men that came up with a brilliant campaign.
So, on my show, what I like to do is I like to promote kindness and equal rights, and I don't like labels, and I don't see color. I'm like a Cocker Spaniel in that way. And I don't like pointing out differences between people, especially men and women. And I thought that women, we've made a lot of progress towards equality. And we're allowed to vote, and I think since 1982 now. And we can wear pants, we can drive at night, all those things have happened. And then I saw something that makes me think we still have a little bit of ways to go. It's a new product from Bic, the pen company. And they have a new line of pens called Bic for Her. And this is totally real. They're pens just for ladies. I know what you're thinking, it's about damn time. Where have our pens been? Can you believe this? We've been using man pens all these years. Yeah. And they come in both lady colors, pink and purple. And they're just like regular pens, except they're pink, so they cost twice as much. That is absolutely true as well. The worst part is they don't come with any instructions. So like, how do they expect us to learn how to write with them, you know? I was reading the back of the pack. Well, I had a man read the back of the package to me. And it said it's designed to fit a woman's hand. This is all true. I'm not making any of this up. Designed to fit a woman's hand. What does that mean? Like, so when we're taking down dictation from our bosses, we'll feel comfortable and we'll forget we're not getting paid as much? I don't know. I mean, just think over the last 20 years, companies have spent millions of dollars making pills that grow men's hair and fix men's sex lives, and now ladies have a pen.
And when we become obsessed with compliance and making sure we're ticking all the boxes, we end up doing things like this. And we think that this is a really inclusive advert. It speaks what every woman wants to do. But it's when we become obsessed with just ticking the box and we can walk away and say, okay. The other barrier that comes with diversity is the diversity training in of itself. Harvard have just released something to say, if you force people to go on diversity training, you actually make it worse for your organization. Because people walk into the room, they grumble, they're full of gut. Now, I'm not selling myself really well, but the reality is that if you force them into the room, they become a deterrent in the room. And so it's something we need to think about. The other thing that happens when you go on diversity training, you realize all the right things to ask, and you become like this guy when you meet somebody that's not like you.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean. But I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea. Double, toil and trouble. Mind the gap! Beware Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Pip pip! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
And that's what happens when we go on these cultural diversity trainings, right? When we don't practice it in our own personal life, it becomes fake. The other thing about diversity training stuff is this, right? We do this thing called moral licensing. So we do what it's called, when you do something good, a little bit of good, it gives you permission to do a lot bad. So myself and Edgar, we play squash twice a week. After we played squash, because we've been really diligent at it, it gives us permission to go eat cheesecake for the rest of the day, right? You have people, and so when we think about this in the diversity space, I have a black friend. Me and Glamini go back many years, which gives me permission to do a whole lot of other bad things, to be racist to a whole bunch of other black folk. We let a woman onto our board, we should celebrate that. But that's the only woman we allow onto our board. It becomes licensing to do a whole bunch of other things that we begin to do. And I think in South Africa, this is something we need to begin to look at. What is the moral licensing that has happened? I think Tennyson, the guy that went on the raid, he lost his mind on Facebook. And his very response after that, but I have black friends, which gives me permission to do all these things. So it's another barrier that stands in the way. And probably the last barrier that stands in the way is the kumbaya thing, right? Diversity training, let's hold hands, sumunye, we are one. Everything is fantastic. And we think about that, but let's think about the young girls in Pretoria High. It's not kumbaya for them. It's not kumbaya when you get searched every time you get on a plane. It's not kumbaya when you have to come to work and you have to sacrifice a bit of yourself every time you walk into the workplace. It's not kumbaya for people that are a different religion to you. And this was something that happened in the US in 2012. the US had some detainees, and the prisoners were passing messages to each other using the Quran. These two young military men found that out. They confiscated the Quran and promptly burnt the Quran in the courtyard outside. If these young men had training, they would understand you can't just get rid of the Quran like that. Because of what these two men did, 30 people lost their lives, over 200 people were injured, and riots went wild. And so diversity does make a difference. It is not a kumbaya thing that we're thinking about. And so we need to really seriously think about how do we leverage the diversity that we have in our organizations, in our churches, in society. Nando's has an option for us which I don't think we should follow.
You know what's wrong with South Africa? All you foreigners. You must all go back to where you came from. You Cameroonians, Congolese, Pakistanis, Somalis, Ghanaians, and Kenyans. And of course, you Nigerians. And you, Europeans. Let's not forget all you Indians and Chinese. Even you Afrikaners. Back to Swaziland for you Swatis, Lesotho for you Sothos, Tswanas, Vendas, Zulus, everybody.
Real South Africans love diversity. That's why we have introduced 2 more items, new peri-crusted wings and delicious chinchado and chips.
Only Nando's. Only Nando's could get away with that, right? And I'm sure it was banned the second it came out. But we cannot deal with diversity by saying, let's all go back to where we came from. And so we need to take it on in a different way. And so in our conversations with organizations, there are a couple of things that we do. One, it starts with leadership. It has to be the leader's utmost focus to drive diversity in the organization. And not just at work. It has to be evident in your personal life first, before you start doing anything anywhere else. So personally, it needs to be there. Representation is key. When people walk into an organization, they need to be able to see people like them, that believe like them, that think like them, and that give them some kind of aspiration in terms of where they're going. The last one is culture. You need to have a culture that makes people feel that everybody matters, that everybody can belong in this organization. And those are the 3 things that if you're going to leverage diversity, you need to work on. There's a process that we've designed around awareness, which is a lot to do with your unconscious bias training and figuring out where you stand and how you operate. There's a lot of stuff around skills and what are the skills I need to engage in a multicultural situation. And pro-social action. Are we willing to make failures? Are we willing to fail in this? Do things differently than we haven't done before? And finally, how do we maintain and grow diversity in organizations so that it becomes a day-to-day event? It's not something that we do once a year. It's not something that we tick, but it's a day-to-day thing. And what are some of the things we can do to inculcate inclusivity in our organizations? And finally, it starts with you. It starts with me, how we begin to engage with everybody. And so I've been given my 5 minutes heads up. And so I want to sort of wrap up the whole day. And I want to talk about a family member of mine that will sort of wrap it up. And if you think about what Bukhle spoke about, what Samani spoke about, and what Edgar spoke about, and it's a lot, and it's the sense that people are feeling tired in the country. People are really just struggling to say, just one more day, not another racist incident. Oh, do I have to really do this? The sense is that people are feeling tired. So I want to share a story about my nephew, Gregory. In 2012, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer, a growth in his leg and his lungs in the beginning of the year. The doctors said that Gregory wouldn't make it to the end of the year, and his family needed to make the most of the opportunity that they had with him. And halfway through the year, Gregory lost mobility, so he was on his crutches. He's 10 years old, by the way, in 2012, and lost mobility. And so he's in the shower one night, and he falls in the shower, and he starts crying. Carrie, my sister-in-law, walks into the shower and sees Gregory on the floor crying. She says, "What's wrong, my boy?" And she says, "Mom, I'm tired. I just want to give up." And so Carrie sits on the floor with the water running and says, "Gregory, let me share something with you. You can be angry, you can be frustrated, you can be confused, you can have all those emotions. But the one thing you may not do, my boy, you may not give up. I'm not allowing you to give up." Gregory passed away on the 26th of December that year. But that story stuck with me. And I think that story is something that I think we need to all think about. You might be laying on the floor crying about whatever situation you find yourself in today. And I want Kerry's words to ring loud to you. You can be upset, you can be frustrated, you can be confused, you can be sad, you can feel downtrodden, but the one thing you may not do, you may not give up. We have come far too far to be where we are now. Too many lives have been lost in this country to get us into this room to have a conversation like this for us to give up. And so let those words ring true to us today. You may not give up. I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. What a privilege for us to stand and speak in front of friends and family and some new friends today. I want to say thank you to Bukhle, Tamani and Edgar. I want to say thank you to the Young and Able team for coming and everybody else. Thank you very much. Thank you.